The rain had been falling on Chicago since early evening, the kind of cold, quiet rain that makes people pull their coats tighter and walk a little faster. It was just past 8 o'clock when a man stepped out of a rusted old car on South Michigan Avenue, turned up the collar of his worn flannel shirt, and walked slowly toward the entrance of Mercy General Hospital. He looked tired. His jeans were faded. His boots had seen better days. He had not shaved in almost a week, and his hair was flat from the rain. A small plastic bag hung from his right hand. Inside it was a cheap phone, a few crumpled dollar bills, and a notebook with a black cover. Nobody looked at him as he pushed through the automatic doors. Nobody nodded. Nobody said good evening. The woman at the front desk was typing fast and talking into a headset. A security guard near the wall was staring at his phone. 2 nurses walked past him so quickly that the air moved. The man stood still for a moment. He looked around the lobby. The floors were clean. The lights were bright. There was a framed quote on the wall that said, "Every patient deserves dignity and care." He read it twice. Then he walked to the reception desk and waited. His name was Marcus Hale. But tonight, nobody would know that. 3 weeks earlier, Marcus had been sitting in a glass conference room on the 42nd floor of a building downtown. He was the CEO of MedBridge Health Systems, a company that owned 14 hospitals across 5 states. The meeting that day was about numbers. Patient satisfaction scores. Complaint rates. Staff turnover. The numbers were not good. One of his directors slid a report across the table. "The feedback from Mercy General is the worst we've seen in 2 years," she said. "Patients are saying they feel ignored. They say the staff is cold. Some of them said they felt like they were being processed, not cared for." Marcus picked up the report. He read a few lines. Then he set it back down. "What do you recommend?" he asked. The room offered several answers. A new training program. A revised patient care policy. A workshop on communication. Marcus listened to all of them. He nodded in the right places. But something was sitting quietly at the back of his mind, and it would not leave. He thought about his father. His father had been a factory worker in Detroit. A quiet, strong man who never complained. When he got sick, he went to a hospital that was much like this one, busy, loud, full of people who were too overwhelmed to stop and look at him properly. His father had waited 6 hours to be seen. When a doctor finally came, he spoke so fast that Marcus's father, whose English was not perfect, could not understand half of what was said. He left with a prescription he did not understand and a fear he never shared with anyone. He died 3 months later of something that could have been treated. Marcus became a healthcare executive because he believed he could change things from the inside. He had spent 20 years trying. But somewhere along the way, the boardrooms and budgets had pulled him far from the thing that mattered most. He had been making decisions about patients without actually being near any of them. The night of the meeting, he called his assistant. "I need you to create a file for a man named Michael Torres," he said. "Low income. No insurance. Lives on the South Side. I need it ready by next Tuesday." His assistant was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Are you sure about this?" "Yes," Marcus said. "I need to see it for myself." Back at the reception desk, Marcus waited for almost 4 minutes before the woman looked up. Her name tag said Carmen. She had a kind face, but her eyes were the eyes of someone who had been answering the same questions for 8 hours straight. "Name," she said. "Michael Torres," Marcus said. She typed without looking at him. "Date of birth." He gave the date his assistant had prepared. Carmen typed it in. "Reason for visit." "Chest pain," Marcus said. "It started a few hours ago. My left side. It comes and goes." Carmen handed him a form on a clipboard. "Fill this out and take a seat. Someone will call you when we're ready." That was all. "No, are you okay?" "No, is the pain bad right now?" "No, can I get you some water?" Just a clipboard and a finger pointing toward a row of plastic chairs near the wall. Marcus took the clipboard and sat down. The waiting room was full. A young woman held a sleeping child in her arms, rubbing the child's back slowly. An older gentleman sat alone near the window, staring at nothing, his hands folded over a wooden cane. A teenage boy held a bag of ice against his foot and stared at the ceiling. A woman in a yellow raincoat was crying very quietly into a tissue. Marcus looked at all of them. He thought, we are all waiting. And not one of us has been told how long. He opened his notebook and began to write. The next 2 hours passed in the slow, heavy way that only hospital waiting rooms can manage. Marcus watched staff come and go. He watched a nurse walk through the room distributing cups of water to some patients, but she skipped 3 seats, including his, without seeming to notice. He watched a young doctor in green scrubs talk on his phone while walking past the row of chairs, eyes fixed on the ground in front of him. At one point, a hospital volunteer, a young man in a yellow vest, came through and asked the woman with the sleeping child if she needed anything. The woman said yes, she would love a blanket. The volunteer said he would get one. He did not come back. Marcus wrote all of it down. Not with anger. Not with the sharp language of a CEO preparing a report. He wrote it the way a person writes when they are simply trying to understand what they are seeing. His notes were short and honest. 2 hours. No one has spoken to me except to hand me a clipboard. The man near the window looks like he is in pain. Nobody has checked on him. At 10:45, a triage nurse called his name, or rather, she called Torres, and he followed her to a small room with a scale, a blood pressure cuff, and a plastic chair. She took his numbers with practiced speed. She did not tell him what they meant. She typed them into a computer, printed a wristband, snapped it onto his arm, and pointed him toward a hallway. Bay 7, she said. Someone will be with you soon. Bay 7 was a small space behind a thin curtain. There was a bed, a machine with wires, a single chair in the corner, and a light that buzzed faintly overhead. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed. He could hear voices on the other side of the curtain. A phone ringing somewhere. The soft sound of wheels on a floor. He waited. At 11:40, a doctor came in. His name tag said Dr. Philip Crane. He was tall, with tired eyes and the kind of face that had once been friendly and had slowly, over many years, become careful. He did not introduce himself. He picked up the chart hanging at the end of the bed, looked at it for about 30 seconds, then looked at Marcus. Chest pain. Left side. How long has it been happening? Since around 6 this evening, Marcus said. Maybe 5 hours. Does it move anywhere? Arm, jaw, back? No. It just sits there. Sometimes it feels tight. Dr. Crane nodded. He had already turned to the computer on the wall and was typing. We'll do an EKG. Check your heart rhythm. A nurse will be in shortly. What do you think it might be? Marcus asked. Could be a few things, Dr. Crane said, still typing. We'll know more after the test. He picked up the chart again, made a note, and walked out. The curtain swung closed. Marcus sat in the silence of Bay 7 and realized that in that entire conversation, Dr. Crane had not once looked him in the eye. A nursing assistant came in 20 minutes later to attach the EKG leads. She was young and moved quickly. She did not speak. She attached the small sticky pads to Marcus's chest and ankles, connected the wires, pressed a button on the machine, waited for the paper to print, and left. The whole thing took less than 4 minutes. Marcus looked at the paper in the machine. He had no idea what the lines on it meant. Nobody told him. It was 12:15 in the morning when the curtain moved again. But this time it was not Dr. Crane, and it was not a nursing assistant. A woman stepped in. She was perhaps 38 years old, with dark hair pulled back, small silver earrings, and the kind of face that looks as though it has laughed a great deal over the years and has not forgotten how. She was wearing dark blue scrubs and carried a tablet under one arm. Her name tag said Elena Vasquez, RN. She was supposed to be checking on a patient in Bay 12. She had been walking past Bay 7 when she paused. Through the small gap in the curtain, she had seen a man sitting on the edge of a bed with his hands folded in his lap, staring at the floor. She knew that kind of stillness. She had seen it many times. It was not the stillness of a person who was calm. It was the stillness of a person who had decided, somewhere along the way, that they were not worth the trouble of making noise. She stepped inside. "Hi," she said simply. "I'm Elena. I'm one of the nurses here tonight. Have you been given your EKG results yet?" Marcus looked up. There was something in her voice that was different from everything he had heard all evening. It was direct but warm. It was the voice of someone who was actually asking, not just collecting information. "No," he said. "Not yet." "Okay. Let me find out for you." She looked at the tablet in her hand, scrolled for a few seconds. "Your EKG looks normal. That's good news. It means your heart rhythm is fine." She looked up at him. "Are you still feeling the chest pain right now?" "It's better than it was," Marcus said. "Good. It might be a muscle strain or something called costochondritis, that's inflammation in the cartilage near your ribs. It can feel exactly like heart pain, which is why it's always right to come in and get checked." She paused. "Are you cold?" "These rooms get cold under the lights." "A little," Marcus admitted. She was gone for less than 2 minutes. She came back with a folded blanket and handed it to him. Then she pulled the small stool from the corner and sat down beside him. She was not supposed to sit. She had 4 other patients to check. She had discharge paperwork waiting. She had been on her feet for 11 hours. But she sat down, and she asked him a question that nobody had asked him all evening. "How are you feeling? Not the pain, just you. How are you doing?" Marcus opened his mouth. He had planned, if anyone asked, to give a simple answer. He was fine. He just wanted to go home. But the question was so unexpected, so genuinely meant, that he found himself pausing. "I've had a long day," he said quietly. Elena nodded. She did not rush past that. She did not say, "Okay," and move on. She just nodded, and waited a moment, and then said, "I'm sorry about that. I hope the rest of the night is easier." They talked for 7 minutes. She explained his results in clear, simple language. She told him what to watch for when he got home. She told him to drink water, rest, and avoid heavy lifting for a day or 2. At the end, she picked up a card from the pocket of her scrubs and held it out to him. "This is the direct number for this floor," she said. "If you feel worse tonight, the pain comes back strong, or you feel short of breath, call that number first before you decide whether to come back in. Don't wait too long thinking you're bothering us. You're not." Marcus took the card. He looked at it for a moment. Then he looked at her. "Thank you," he said. And he meant it in a way that she could not possibly have understood. Elena smiled. "Take care of yourself, Mr. Torres." She stood, pushed the stool back to the corner, and walked out. Marcus was discharged at 1:30 in the morning. He walked back through the waiting room, quieter now, only a handful of people left, past the reception desk, past the framed quote about dignity and care, and out through the automatic doors into the cold. The rain had stopped. The street was wet and shining under the orange lights. He walked slowly to the car and sat inside without starting the engine. He looked at his notebook. He had filled 9 pages. He read back through everything he had written. The 4-minute wait at the desk that felt like being invisible. The triage nurse who did her job perfectly and felt nothing. Dr. Crane, who was clearly intelligent and clearly not present. The volunteer who promised a blanket and disappeared. The 2 hours in the waiting room where no one had said his name. And then 7 minutes with Elena Vasquez, who had walked into a room she did not need to walk into, sat down on a stool she did not need to sit on, and spoken to him like he was a person who deserved to be spoken to. He thought about the card in his hand. He turned it over. Just a hospital number. Nothing special about it at all. And yet, he thought about his father. He thought about the hospital in Detroit, the fast-talking doctor, the prescription that nobody explained. He thought about what his father must have felt, sitting in a room just like Bay 7, waiting for someone to look at him. Marcus pressed his head back against the seat and closed his eyes. When he opened them, he picked up his real phone, not the cheap one in the plastic bag, but the one with 47 unread emails and a calendar full of meetings, and he began to type a note to himself. He did not write a policy recommendation. He did not write a list of changes. He just wrote a few sentences, the kind a person writes when they're trying not to forget something important. He wrote, "She did not know who I was. She treated me that way anyway. That is either the rarest thing in this building, or it should be the most common. I have to find out which one. And then I have to do something about it." 6 days passed. On a Monday morning, Elena Vasquez was called into the office of the nursing director. She had been called in before, twice for staying past her shift without filing the right paperwork, once because a patient had complained that she spent too long with them and other patients felt ignored. She walked in already preparing her explanation. The nursing director was standing near the window. And beside her desk sat a man in a clean dark suit. He stood when Elena came in. He had kind eyes and a face she recognized, though she could not place it immediately. "Elena," the nursing director said, "this is Marcus Hale." He held out his hand. "We met last Tuesday night," he said. "Bay 7. You brought me a blanket." Elena went very still. Then she looked at him more carefully. The flannel shirt. The unshaved face. The man who said his name was Torres. "That was you," she said. It was not a question. "That was me," Marcus said. He sat back down and asked her to take a seat. Then he told her everything. He told her why he had come, what he had seen, and what he had written in his notebook. He spoke plainly, without the kind of careful language that executives often use to say a lot while meaning very little. He told her about the things that had gone wrong. And he told her about 7 minutes in Bay 7 that he had not been able to stop thinking about. Elena listened without speaking. When he was finished, he leaned forward slightly and said, "I am making changes here. Real ones. I'm creating a council made up of frontline staff, nurses, assistants, people who work on this floor every day. I want that council to have real authority over how this hospital trains its people in patient care. Not administrators. Not consultants." He paused. "I want you to lead it." The room was quiet. Elena looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "A council doesn't change what happens at 3 in the morning when there are 40 patients and 6 nurses." "I know," Marcus said. "That's why we're also looking at staffing ratios. And the training budget. And the way complaints are handled. This is not a single meeting with a nice title. I mean it to be real." "People have said that before," Elena said. "I know they have," Marcus said. "And I can't undo that. But I can tell you what is different this time." He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and placed a small card on the desk. It was the card Elena had given him 6 days ago, the direct number to her floor. "I kept this," he said. "Not as a symbol. Just because it reminded me of what it actually looks like when someone does their job the right way." Elena looked at the card. She looked at the men across the desk. She did not say yes right away. She asked 6 hard questions about budget, about protection, about who would have final say. Marcus answered 5 of them directly. The 6th, he said, was still being worked out, and he would not pretend otherwise. She told him she needed a few days to think. He told her to take a week. She stood, and shook his hand, and walked out of the office, back down the hallway, past Bay 7, toward the nurses' station where 3 of her colleagues were already starting the morning round. She never did end up taking the full week. She called Marcus's office on Wednesday afternoon. She said yes. But she also said something else, something that Marcus later told people was the most useful thing anyone had ever said to him in 20 years of business. She said, "The problem in this hospital is not that people are bad. The problem is that nobody ever taught them that the small things are the big things. Nobody told them that making eye contact costs nothing. That saying someone's name costs nothing. That asking how they are, not the pain, just them, costs nothing. These things are free. And somehow we still ran out of them." Marcus wrote that down too. He had it printed on a single card, the same size as the card she had given him, and placed on the desk of every department head in the MedBridge network. It did not fix everything. Nothing fixes everything. But it started something. A conversation. A question. A reminder that hospitals are full of people, not just patients, and that the distance between the two is sometimes as small as 7 minutes and a folded blanket. Elena Vasquez still works at Mercy General. She leads the Patient Experience Council on Tuesdays and does her regular shifts the rest of the week. She says the council meetings are sometimes frustrating and slow, and that real change in large institutions is like turning a ship. It takes time, and you have to keep your hands on the wheel. But she also says that things are different now, in ways that matter. New nurses receive training that nobody used to think to give them, not just medical skills, but how to sit with someone in fear. How to explain something in plain language. How to remember that behind every chart and wristband is a person who walked through those automatic doors, in the rain, not knowing what would happen next. Marcus Hale still runs MedBridge Health Systems. He visits hospitals twice a year now, with a badge, in daylight, with appointments. But the visit to Mercy General on that Tuesday night is the one he talks about the most. I needed to remember what it felt like to not matter, he said in an interview the following year. Because when you forget what that feels like, you stop understanding why your job matters. And I had forgotten. For a long time, I had forgotten. He paused. One nurse reminded me. That is a true story. The framed quote still hangs in the lobby of Mercy General Hospital. The one that says, "Every patient deserves dignity and care." Beneath it, someone taped a smaller piece of paper. Nobody knows who put it there. The hospital stopped asking. It says, and we mean it.